Saturday, go under the sea.
Come on.
Where Sebastian's rockin' and everybody's talking about that awesome Ariel in the all-new Disney's The Little Mermaid. Saturday on CBS Kid TV.
Welcome, one and all, to the triumphant return of Escape from Walt Disney, the podcast where we review movies, TV shows, and short films available on the Disney Plus streaming service, chosen mostly completely at random. I'm your host, Tony Goldmark, and we are back, ladies and gentlemen, after a 5-month hiatus.
It's alive!
We're free! You can't get rid of us that easily!
It takes more than some virus to defeat us!
We were on lockdown in this vault before it was cool.
After a 5-month hiatus, Escape from Walt Disney has returned. We went on indefinite hiatus back in April due to the coronavirus because ideally I like to record episodes with everyone physically in the same room together, and obviously social distancing guidelines prevented and continue to prevent us from doing that safely.
Thanks, anti-maskers.
But to hell with it, I got tired of waiting. We are now back with weekly episodes recorded over Zoom. I want to thank all my listeners for waiting so patiently. I especially want to thank all my Patreon patrons for continuing their support during these rough times. You don't know how much it means to me. And I also want to thank everyone who followed along with the weekly live tweets I've been doing over at the Escape from Walt Disney Twitter feed at EFVD Podcast. In lieu of an actual podcast, every week I've been letting the randomizer choose 4 Disney Plus titles, which my followers would then vote on, and every Thursday night for the last 5 months I've been live tweeting something on Disney Plus. Every 5 weeks we do opposite week, where I would cover something that got the fewest votes. It was a lot of fun, and you can still find all those live tweets archived at tinyurl.com/EFVDLiveTweets2020. And by the way, everything I covered in those live tweets is still eligible to be covered on the podcast proper. The live tweets were just a little bonus addendum to that.
Also, it's all canon.
Yes.
It's all canon. It's all part of the Escape from Walt Disney Greater Expanded Universe.
Joining me on the podcast today for our triumphant return, you've already heard their voices, are 3 very special guests. Please welcome via Zoom, all the way from Burbank, California, Kyle Carrozza.
You've already heard my voices.
All the way from Riverside, California, Morgan Funder.
Hello, hello, hello.
And joining us for the very first time on Escape from Walt Disney, all the way from Rohnert Park, California. You know her from her various appearances in my videos. You know her from the Twitter feed at Missy0N Breakout. And most of all, I know her as the best damn girlfriend a geek like me could possibly ask for. Please welcome the lovely and amazing Kitty Quinn!
Hello, everybody. I'm really excited to be here. I'll try not to be obnoxious, but basically I'll be like the Roy Simpson of the podcast, just showing up randomly while you guys talk about Poochie or something.
You picked the wrong show to not want to be obnoxious. That is a prerequisite.
Now, if you're super obnoxious, that one guy will animate you.
Yeah. Shout out to Micah Hirsch, the guy who sometimes does Game Grumps-esque animations of the various bullcrap we say on this podcast.
That guy's amazing.
Hello, Micah.
That's so cool. Yeah, thanks, Micah.
So anyway, since this podcast has finally returned, that also means it's finally time for us to continue Patreon Request Month, ladies and gentlemen.
Bum, 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 bum.
We started this on the very last show we recorded before the hiatus, when the topic was Walt Disney's original Pinocchio, requested by Lizzie Gravel.
Not Geppetto, 0 stars.
All this time throughout the hiatus, the request lines have remained open over at my Patreon, patreon.com/Tony Goldmark.
Give him money.
And all this month on Escape from Walt Disney, all throughout September, we are going to cover 5 more of the dozens of requests that I have received. Now, of those 5, 4 of them will be chosen randomly by the randomizer, but this week, we're going to do something a little different. Now, I recently finished a video on the recently announced changes that Disney's going to make to Splash Mountain, turning it into a Princess and the Frog ride. At one point in the video, I talk about the cultural impact of the song Zippity Doo-Dah, and how it's the only thing anyone remembers about Song of the South, because Song of the South is not a good movie. No. And just for fun, I edited together an elaborate montage of 20 different cover performances of Zippity Doo-Dah. I released the clip of that montage early to my patrons along with a fun little contest. The first person to correctly identify all 20 artists in that montage would get their request covered, guaranteed, on the first return episode of Escape from Walt Disney, so this very episode. Now, the winner of that contest was one Mr. Rob Bergman. Congratulations, Rob. Woo. Good guy. He's been a fan of mine for quite some time. He goes by @RobSnatcher on Twitter. I've actually met him in person a couple times. I ran into him at least once at the parks and again at D23 Expo last year. And by a staggering coincidence, he also won the Show Me Your Doc contest I did for my Back to the Future The Ride video about 5 years ago. So he's good at winning contests devised by me. So
that's a very specific skill.
#obscure superpowers.
Yes. He sent me his request in an email, which I have not read yet. I've specifically withheld reading his email until this very moment. I have no idea what his request is, but I'm about to find out. Drum roll, please. And Rob Bergman's request for the topic of the very first post-hiatus episode of Escape from Walt Disney is The Little Mermaid series, Season 3, Episode 3, Island of Fear.
Oh.
Okay.
I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't something that specific.
Obviously, we've all seen The Little Mermaid. Obviously, we all know the movie. What is your connection to the series?
Watched it occasionally on Disney Channel, but it was one of those things I'd watch when it was on, and not something I ever sought out.
It was never appointment viewing.
Right, not for me.
So I remember watching a couple of episodes of it growing up. I was more of a fan of the Aladdin show and then the Hercules series, so I was vaguely familiar with it because they were playing it on Toon Disney, as it was referred to as the time. I don't really remember a lot about it, but I remember two things specifically. One, that there was a really sweet episode about a deaf girl, so that was really cool.
Huh.
And then there was another episode that involved dinosaurs for some fucking reason.
Yeah, fucking dinosaurs are in the Little Mermaid universe now.
Yeah, I do remember one episode with a really creative monster that was a brain sponge, and it would latch onto your head and it would suck away your imagination.
Wow.
And I remember thinking that was the scariest thing. And the bad guy had it on a leash, and it would strain at the leash with its spongy little teeth, trying to get. It's like head crabs for kids. I don't even know if I could finish the episode.
Sounds like Jonan Vasquez wrote an episode of Little Mermaid.
You joke, but that's a real possibility.
I mean, I'd watch it.
So are they like a version of the mind control slugs from Futurama?
Your next delivery is to go to the brain slug planet and just walk around not wearing a hat.
I think it was one of Ariel's sisters who got hit by it. Such a deep character to begin with.
Right.
But
had a whole name.
I don't remember exactly what the sponge did. I have to admit that I would be making it up. But I remember the effect it had on Little Morgan, which was, I was terrified of this thing. I had legitimate nightmares about getting my imagination sucked out of my head by something that looked like a wad of off-white chewing gum.
The Little Morgan was not as successful a series.
No, the Little Morgan was mostly sneaking off to the bathroom to read Animorphs books.
Sounds like Morgan Freeman had a Nick Jr. series or something. I wonder if the same person who wrote that episode you just described wrote the episode of Darkwing Duck with the hat aliens.
Oh, I remember the hat aliens. That was
what was
creepy
it with
too.
children's programming in the 90s and brain-eating monsters? Because they also did that in the BBC series that was on Nickelodeon for a while.
The Tomorrow People?
The Tomorrow People, yeah. They also had these monstrous alien eggs that would suck your mind out.
It's a sci-fi trope. They just parodied it on Rick and Morty this past season as well. But I did actually cover an episode of the Little Mermaid series in the live tweets I mentioned earlier. I covered an episode called King Crab, where Sebastian's relatives come to visit Atlantica, and he pretends he's the king because he wrote a bunch of self-aggrandizing letters to them. And
if they believed that, that's really on them.
And in the episode, there was a race of mafia sharks, mutated sharks who had arms, and it was pretty stupid.
Was this a rejected Fish Police script?
I'm sure it was. And they later stole the idea for Shark Tale.
Right.
Was this a deeply strange show?
It was pretty straight. It was a prequel series. Ariel was still a mermaid, so obviously it took place before the movie. So it's just weird to imagine that all of this is canon and all this weird shit in this universe had already happened by the time the movie happens. And the movie is just kind of this conventional love story by comparison.
It doesn't even have a single dinosaur or brain sponge in it.
What the fuck, Howard Ashman? You dropped the ball. When I was a kid, I was a stupid boy, and I just went, oh, that's a girl's show. I don't want to watch that. Although they did kind of try to make the show appealing to boys. They gave Ariel not a boyfriend, but a strictly platonic male friend named Urchin. Does anyone remember Urchin?
Was he a merman? Or
Yeah, he was a merman, and he didn't come up in the movie at all. Something bad happened to him. I think Ursula turned him into a polyp.
Urchin died on his way to his home planet.
I did catch a couple episodes here and there, mostly in reruns later on the Disney Channel or Toon Disney. I remember the dinosaur episode. I also vaguely remember an episode where Sebastian becomes a giant for some reason. Why didn't that come up in the movie? Like, hey, Sebastian, remember when you were a fucking giant?
They put it in Moana instead.
Yeah, exactly. Kyle, what's your connection to the Little Mermaid series?
If I saw one or two of them, it's a lot, because I know it was a Saturday morning show rather than a Disney afternoon show. I wonder if it was on opposite something I liked a lot.
It was on CBS Saturday mornings. It was one of the few shows developed by Walt Disney Television Animation during the height of the Disney afternoon era, which was not actually on the Disney afternoon. It was just made for Saturday morning. That and New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh and Marsupilami were the three big ones that didn't actually make the Disney afternoon cut.
I guess besides maybe the Winnie the Pooh cartoon, I wonder how much this threw kids for a loop, because before that, all the series on Disney Channel that were based on previously existing products were like that shitty live-action Pooh series with the fucking...
Oh, yeah.
Too Smart for Strangers and Dumbo Circus.
Yeah, Dumbo Circus. All those puppet shows because Eisner hadn't taken over and instilled, yeah, we gotta do Saturday morning cartoons, so the only way to make cheap programming based on those characters was to do, like, puppet shows and shit.
My kids like those gummy bear candies. Can you make a show about those?
And indeed they did.
We have Stan Freberg trapped in a cage. Let's make the Wuzzles.
You know, it just occurred to me, Little Mermaid, Aladdin, and Hercules, all the Musker Clements movies got animated series.
They also wanted to make a Treasure Planet series, but that flopped. So.
Yeah. I remember the Aladdin show very well, because that show was actually really good.
And that's not on Disney Plus for some reason. I don't know why.
If I had to guess, I think it's like every now and then they still have something big to drop, you know.
Right.
Make it trend on Twitter.
They're terrified of everybody who's gonna fall in love with Mose and Wrath and try to call Adam Driver to get him to play him.
Oh, that would be amazing. If they do a sequel to the 2019 Will Smith movie, that's how you make it interesting. Fucking work Mose and Wrath into it and cast Adam Driver. That would be fucking amazing.
And Jason Alexander.
But we're watching the Little Mermaid series, season 3, episode 3.
It just occurred to me, there were 3 seasons of this?
The third season is only 8 episodes.
Oh, okay,
and
one of those.
The second season is only 9 episodes.
It was like how Netflix markets seasons of animated series now when they release like 5 episodes and then call it a season.
I think they were doing something similar with Muppet Babies after a while, too.
It's a grand total of 30 episodes. Also, fun fact, when I was doing that live tweet, somebody told me, I forget who, that the Little Mermaid series premiered like the exact same day as Batman the Animated Series. Maybe that was what was on opposite that time.
Yeah, I can see how that would sort of poison the well.
And of course, both based on movies from 1989, and I'm sure we can all agree, both equally well remembered. Both equally fondly. I can't count the number of urchin cosplayers I've seen at conventions. But I noticed this episode we're covering right here, Island of Fear, Season 3, Episode 3, is right between King Crab, the one I covered for the live tweet, and the dinosaur episode, Land of the Dinosaurs. So I don't know what was so special about this episode that Rob saw fit to request it, but I guess we're going to find out. We will be right back with our thoughts on The Little Mermaid series, Season 3, Episode 3, Island of Fear, here on Escape from Walt Disney.
If we don't like it, we turn into sea foam.
Come on home. See what's waiting for you. Waiting for you.
Okay, we just watched The Little Mermaid series, Season 3, Episode 3, Island of Fear, first aired October 1st, 1994. What the fuck was that?
Mutant crabs!
Crab experiments!
Mutant crabs!
Was pure nightmare.
You got Little Mermaid and my Frankenstein. You got Frankenstein and my Little Mermaid. What the fuck?
Remember when I was trying to remember if this was a weird show?
We had no idea.
This show must have unintentionally traumatized so many kids.
Imagine being like an 8-year-old girl. Oh, Little Mermaid show. This will be cute. And just fucking crab monsters.
One of the crabs was hairy like a tarantula. And
When Sebastian falls in the dungeon and those giant mutant crab monsters with like no pupils and glowing eyes. My God. How many nightmares did that give kids?
Probably would have caused more nightmares if it was animated better.
Then he comes across little baby Tim Burton.
He comes across a Onceler prototype.
The fucking goth kid. How many goth kids became goth kids because of Daniel in this episode? There's literally a scene where the kid just fucking says, "It gets awfully quiet around here, except for the screaming." Like, Jesus Christ! Like I said, this aired October 1st. Was this intended to be a Halloween episode? Because that's the only explanation I can think of for how this even makes remote sense. Because it is a full-blown Frankenstein homage. Ariel, Sebastian, Flounder, and Scuttle all go to this fucking Castle Frankenstein, where this evil mad scientist who looks like a fucking goblin, he doesn't even look human, is doing all these crab experiments. Crab-based experiments. Not experimenting on humans, not trying to regenerate human flesh. And his name is Dr. Vile. That's the other thing.
Dr. Vile sounds like a knockoff brand of Viagra.
And he's trying to get into the Mad Scientist Hall of Fame.
You know,
because it's too early to try to get into the Evil League of Evil.
Like I said, this premiered at the same time as Batman the Animated Series. I feel like Batman the Animated Series so raised the bar on what a Saturday morning TV show was capable of that people forget that at the same time, shit like this existed. Just drunk writers in the writer's room just going, yeah, make a fucking Frankenstein. Who gives a shit?
If you made me put money on it, I'd say the Little Mermaid TV show was staffed exclusively by disaffected horror writers who hated that they had to work on the Little Mermaid.
Yeah, this episode was their excuse to get all their jollies out.
More crab monsters!
And just make an episode about some evil goblin mad scientist making fucking crab monsters.
Did I mention they had a hairy crab that was like hairy like a tarantula? Their creature design department was like, yes!
Yeah, you can tell this is where the designers on this show finally got a chance to have fun and design crazy crab creatures. He's literally got a giant mutated crab named Igor.
Real clever name.
As if the thing they're referencing wasn't obvious enough for you stupid kids. And there's a shot where you see all of Dr. Vile's monsters just lined up in a row, and I swear to God, one of them is just straight up Gossamer from the Looney Tunes. The big red hairy monster.
My, I'll bet you monsters lead interesting lives. I said to my girlfriend just the other day, gee, I'll bet monsters are interesting, I said.
Well, it's also an environmental message because, you know, pollution is bad.
That's seriously where I thought they were going. Like,
so are giant crab monsters.
The episode begins totally normal. Ariel, Sebastian, Scuttle, and Flounder are frolicking around. Scuttle's doing a less funny version of the scene in the movie where he explains what human shit is. And then suddenly they see this gross, smelly gack in the water.
It was gack because it's the 90s.
And Ariel wants to track it to see where it came from so they can stop it from polluting the water. And you think this is going to turn into a fucking Captain Planet episode. This is going to be a boring, preachy, environmental PSA. All right, settle in. And instead it turns into Frankenstein!
Turns into Crab Frankenstein, but with more monsters.
It's the best bait and switch ever. It's so amazingly stupid.
It was basically their Halloween and their freaking Earth Day episode all at once. I was disappointed that the slime in the water didn't lead to the villain in Fern Gully or something. Apparently Tim Curry was in another episode playing a character called Manta, so...
Well, speaking of voice actors, the voice of Dr. Vile was Kenneth Mars, who also did the voice of Triton in in both the movie and the series. So, read what you want into the Oedipal implications of that shit.
I know.
Did he at any point explain why he was so fixated on Sebastian specifically? Because it feels like he was really attached to this one crab when there's an ocean full of the damn things.
He wants to make crabs bigger, fatter, and tastier, but he's not actually eating his mutant crabs. He's just using them as pets and bodyguards. Are those the experiments that went wrong? Is that the implication here?
Maybe he ate all the ones that went right.
I guess so.
Is he waiting for Lobster Fest?
Sir, I couldn't find any crabs for your crab experiments, but I did find this lobster. Be gone with that lobster!
We are a crab household, young missy!
A lobster killed my family.
Ariel doesn't do much in
No,
the episode.
she has nothing to do.
Except kind of save herself by figuring out how a human machine works.
She's in that watery basement for the whole episode. Does Dr. Vile know she's down there? Because they never interact with each other.
Ariel's wonderful way of hiding is just to sort of duck down in the water a little bit. She remains completely visible the entire time.
We'd better trap some seafood for my crab monster. They need nourishment. And then, like, bars drop down, which any fish would be able to swim through.
Unless they was specifically trying to catch mermaids.
Yeah.
Buddy, you're a mad scientist. This is a magical creature. Does this open any mad evil possibilities at all? He's way more excited about the crab than the mermaid.
Yeah.
Let me put it that way.
Well, does he even know the mermaid's there? I mean, does he even know mermaids exist in this universe?
I have no idea.
I think he would have to by now.
You mentioned a line earlier that I made it a point to write down, and I feel like we need to break down a little bit.
Okay.
After all, every monster needs his nourishment, followed by maniacal laughter.
Right.
There's, like, no pun, there's no, like, clever wordplay. I feel like even for mad scientist laughter, this comes out of frigging nowhere.
Yeah.
Every monster needs his nourishment.
Concept of consuming calories to fuel your body is just so diabolical.
If you really think about it, it's hilarious.
Well, he's got Arthur Fleck disease where he just randomly laughs at shit.
I do like the runner of crab experiments. Just saying that. I wish they hit it a little bit harder, but I did enjoy that as a runner. Crab, because they know how dumb those words sound together.
It was their version of Frau Bluha.
Do you think years later, Dr. Vile's grandson would tell people it's Vile? My grandfather was a very sick man.
Yes, I know that my first name's Kyle, and you want to say Kyle Vile, but no, it's Kyle Vile.
How come the kid can hear Sebastian talk and the scientist can't?
No, the scientist can. There's a scene where Sebastian says something and Dr. Vile responds to it.
Poor Daniel. Poor Daniel. Poor you.
Also, there was that scene in the movie during the Kiss the Girl sequence when Sebastian whispered into Eric's ear and Eric heard him, so I think Sebastian can just talk.
Ariel. Her name is Ariel.
Ariel? Ariel?
As horrifying as this episode was, no wonder she can't wait to get out of the ocean. Just get me out of here!
Well, it's a good thing she didn't actually go into the castle and see what fucking Dr. Vile looked like, because then she'd never want to see a human again. Like, the movie would not have happened. She would have been like, no, fuck that, I'm staying down here.
Those sons of bitches are up to what?
Even at the beginning of the episode, when Sebastian and his little mini Huey, Dewey, and Louie crabs are fucking spending the day on the beach, like, motherfucker, in the movie, you did a whole fucking song about how dangerous the surface was, and now you're doing a song about how much you love the beach. I mean, this kind of explains the movie, because his interactions with Dr. Vile gave him PTSD, and now he hates the whole fucking surface world.
I just thought it was a Scared Straight program for the junior wood crabs.
I've seen what it's like up there, man!
Even the nice human locked him in a cage.
Did you notice that he had a tiny crab-sized engineer's cap already for some reason?
Why do I get the feeling Sebastian's not the first crab that he's befriended like this?
That rubber crab toy was actually a stuffed crab or something.
Yeah, definitely.
He made me eat the other ones.
Also, he has fucking claws. He could just pinch the kid and then jump away.
Fucking Zoidberg was better at self-defense than Sebastian. That, I think, was Dr. Vile's endgame. He really wanted to turn all these crabs into Zoidberg.
He wanted to turn himself into Zoidberg.
How do we know Zoidberg wasn't a Dr. Vile creation? Huh?
And then he randomly shows up in Duck Dodgers because why not?
Why not Zoidberg?
It feels like they just went off the fucking walls and had to write a fucking prequel to The Little Mermaid. They were just like, okay, how do we possibly set up elements like how they distrust humans? Then they have like an ending with him trusting a human even after he fucking tortured him.
He goes back to save the kid after all this?
Yeah, it doesn't fit at all.
I guess you can argue that his change comes from the fact that he admits his family's taking this job and now he has to like unionize.
Yeah.
By the way, this episode would piss off Walt.
Oh, this is an indictment of capitalism, this whole episode.
Yeah.
People being forced to work for non-essential jobs for mad scientists during a coronavirus.
During the scenes where like Sebastian's trapped out on the operating table, I kept thinking of that bonus Into the Spider-Verse short they added with Spider-Ham and that one lobster villain.
Yeah.
Like a reverse of that, I guess.
Crabs doing experiments. Completely different issue.
The other thing they let Ariel do in this episode is at the end when she throws the monkey wrench into the wheel thingy, which causes the whole castle to blow up somehow.
Which is something Sebastian learned from little baby Tim Burton. And Scuttle almost ruined it because he doesn't know what a monkey wrench is.
Right. Doesn't know what anything is, really.
I will say the line about him using it to wrench your monkeys is...
Yeah, one of the few actual jokes in this thing.
You think Scuttle's ever seen what sex looks like? Then how does he explain that?
Fucking better. He'd fucking better. There's the scene in the movie where Scuttle peers through the window and sees Vanessa is really Ursula, so he probably peers into bedroom windows all the time.
He probably was the one who spotted the priest's boner when Vanessa shows up.
Now, humans do this thing they call blangledats, where they lay on top of each other. See, you just lay your eggs for fertilization. They do this whole process.
There's a line that Scuttle says near the end where it's another thing where it's like, we'll present this as a joke, there is no joke here. This time, I'll be the lookout, and he makes this weird little laugh noise. That I have a feeling was just something Maurice threw in there that wasn't intended to be animated.
Yeah, Scuttle in this series was voiced by Maurice LaMarche doing a Buddy Hackett impression, because even though Buddy Hackett was still alive at the time, I guess they just couldn't afford him.
Like, how expensive could Buddy Hackett possibly have been?
Well, he was pretty much the only celebrity in the movie. I wouldn't be surprised if they paid him more than any of the other actors in the movie, so maybe it was a contractual thing. I'm pretty sure he's the only actor from the movie not to reprise his role in the series, except for the voice of Flounder, because the voice of Flounder was a child actor whose voice had changed by that point, even though the voice of Flounder in this series is clearly post-pubescent, even though it's supposed to take place before the movie.
Well, you know, they probably cast him in season 1.
But also, we don't know how fish puberty works. Maybe it works backwards.
Hashtag fish puberty. I would listen to Maurice LaMarche read the phone book.
Right.
I could tell it was him. I don't care that I could tell it was him. I do think he's capable of a better Buddy Hackett, but I have a theory. Mm-hmm. I think that they might have had him throw it a little bit off Hackett because of the lawsuit that Louis Prima's widow had after Jim Cummings did a very close to Louis Prima sounding King Louis in Tailspin.
Tailspin really should have had Jim Cummings impersonate Christopher Walken. That would have solved the problem.
That would have been great. When in doubt, add more Walken.
And also, this was just after the whole business with Robin Williams, and I also think Dan Castellaneta could have done a better Robin Williams.
I was too young when I saw the Aladdin series to spot who was doing Genie's voice. I knew it didn't sound right. It sounded like he had a stuffy nose the whole time.
He was basically doing Homer Simpson, but deeper, I guess.
Chest voice Homer Simpson.
Ooh, she dances.
I gotta say, I fucking loved this episode. I really did.
I fucking loved it.
This is insane.
It's a horror show that just happens to star Ariel from The Little Mermaid.
I feel like if the show was slightly better, they would have played up a little bit more how fucking stupid this episode was. But they couldn't quite go there. Like it's
like one person wanted to, and that's where we got crab experiments.
Yeah, the writer just writes this ridiculous-ass fucking script that no one would take seriously, and everyone else on the production team is like, well, better take it seriously. Let's make this fucking Frankenstein episode.
Do you get the feeling that maybe this episode was an exercise by the writers to see just how low the quality control was? Can we write this episode and get away with it? Like, we're not going to dip our toe all the way in. Can we make it just this stupid and still get it produced?
This also had to inspire that fucking episode of SpongeBob where they all start freezing their faces, and then there's like a scene at the end where Mr. Krabs' faces freeze. That looked exactly like half of these.
That's what this is. This is a SpongeBob episode that was forced to be a Little Mermaid episode, because this kind of shit is just dumb enough for SpongeBob.
Crab experiments.
By the standards of this series, this looked like kind of an expensive episode, just in the sense that almost every background is unique to it. Like, they never fucking went back to Dr. Vile's castle, unless this was just reused shit from Count Duckula or some shit, which I don't think was even a Disney show.
The mechanics on those turning gears on the machine and everything, that had effort put into it. Some poor Japanese animator was chained to their desk for 10 hours getting that gear to rotate properly.
And yet at the same time, this show was so cheap and so shoddily put together. There is a solid 10 seconds or so in this episode where the middle of the screen is just blurry. I thought I had something on my screen at first. I guess some animator got something on a cell or something and it was too expensive to change it.
It was actually during that Scuttle line I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And I thought that it might have been an attempt to, like, blur out what was going on behind Scuttle, so it's like, suddenly the attention is on Scuttle and he's having his line, which is probably giving them way too much credit.
Probably. Just a few notes on the show in general. They couldn't decide whether to use Part of Your World, Under the Sea, or Kiss the Girl for the opening theme music, so they just did all three.
Yeah, it gives you weird whiplash.
This weird instrumental medley hybrid of all three, because they couldn't decide. Every other show based on a movie, it's like Aladdin, we're using Arabian Nights. Timon and Pumbaa, we're using Hakuna Matata. Here, it's like, just all three. Who cares?
Oddly long opening theme, wasn't it?
Yeah, it did seem
Plus,
a bit
Kiss
long.
the Girl really doesn't make sense to use in this context.
Not at all.
Yeah, she hasn't met Prince Eric yet.
Part of Your World doesn't make sense, because she doesn't really want to go to the surface yet.
Music doesn't make sense. We're canceling music.
Under the Sea would make perfect sense as just the straight-up theme to their show. I guess they gotta get in the other earworms. They should have added Les Poissons. I mean, come on. I don't know if every episode of this on Disney Plus is cropped for widescreen, but this one was, and this aired in 1994. There was no way it was broadcast in widescreen.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. It's very much like the way it was when they put The Simpsons up.
Right.
It's HD,
But no one cares enough about this show to fix that for this.
Also, the fact that it's in HD just kind of shows off how low television animation production quality was, at least in this show at the time.
It looked about as good as you could reasonably expect a Saturday morning Little Mermaid series to look in the early 90s, but that's not saying much.
Can I get into this for a second as the animator in the room?
Absolutely.
The thing about this particular style of Saturday morning animation in the 90s is that if you really look at it, they're using a theatrical number of drawings, but the particular animators that they used didn't know where to put them. Like, it is much better to try to stylize your animation for TV, which is a little bit more difficult when you're using the exact designs from a movie.
Right.
They probably did not have any instructions when it came to how to stylize this to make this actually work at a television budget and amount of time. And so, like, here is the right number of drawings, but they don't know how to animate this. You could tell from looking at the opening theme, sometimes they did. If you got like an episode from Disney Japan, they kind of knew what they were doing, and the episodes looked better, but they couldn't give every episode to that.
It felt like at times they were trying to go for a Ghibli effect, because you'll have like scenes where things really slow down during the animation, but then it doesn't have the same fluidity that a lot of Ghibli animation has, so it just looks really slow. It's like, I gotta wonder if there was maybe something to do with the remaster when they added it on Disney Plus.
And I feel like Disney Toon Studios eventually got their act together in that regard. You look at the difference between the Little Mermaid series and, say, Little Mermaid 3 Ariel's Beginning, and it's just night and day. Little Mermaid 3 still doesn't look as good as the original movie, but it looks better than the series did. And that was also the era of Bambi 2 and Brother Bear 2, which, again, didn't look as good as the original movies, but looked better than what Disney Toon Studios was cranking out in the 90s.
There are a few factors to that. A lot of it has to do with digital production, because you can tell by looking at this is still done the old school way, with hand-painted cells. And also, movies were done on much larger paper. So, because like the cells and the paper were so much larger, you can get a lot more detail without quite so much wiggling. And also, they still weren't made for HD. By the time you get to that third movie, everybody's working digitally, and you don't have to worry about the size of things like that. You just kind of have to worry about line quality instead.
Right.
I don't think they had Australia handle any episodes of this show. This episode was handled by Wong, who is already doing better work on Animaniacs at this point.
I was thinking that this kind of reminded me of the animation studio TMS, is it called? That was behind Animaniacs and Batman the Animated Series. I think they also did Hunchback 2, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, man.
There's a downgrade.
Hunchback 2.
A good TMS episode and Disney Japan are very hard to tell apart. Australia could do some really nice looking episodes of TV shows. They did a lot of the first episode of Darkwing and the first episode of Goof Troop, for example. But then once you gave those guys digital tools to work with, their direct-to-videos looked almost as good as what was actually happening in main Disney animation.
One of Bruce Timm's best ideas that changed animation in the 90s was that he was able to use the aesthetic to make a lot of really impactful, really simple character designs. And these character designs were very detailed.
Yeah.
And didn't look great when they moved. When Sebastian moves, he's a crab. He's got 8 limbs, and they're everywhere when he's scuttling around.
Yeah, they were kind of stuck with the designs they had from the movie, and when they made the movie, they weren't thinking, oh, this is going to be an animated TV show someday. Least of all at the time they were making Little Mermaid, because Disney wasn't really doing that yet.
And absolutely nobody looks anything like Ariel. No. She was dropped in from an entirely different universe.
Just random half-naked hot chick.
It's a bunch of cartoon animals and actual photographs of Sherry Stoner.
Not only that, but it kind of lacks an interesting main character. I had forgotten how flat and wooden Ariel is in this series.
Yeah, she doesn't really want anything except to stop the pollution.
But even then, she takes her sweet time about it.
It felt like they were afraid because a bunch of people were bitching, oh, she's so selfish in the movie. It's yeah, she has a personality. That's what makes her awesome. And then this series, they're okay, let's dumb her down so she has basically no personality.
In the movie, she has so much life and so much spirit, and she's so driven.
I have heard the argument that some people have made that in the movie, all she wants is the man, whereas in the series, she was actually a rough and tough, rugged adventurer who went off on various quests and shit.
She is very Lois Lane in this.
And that's all well and good, but yeah, personality-wise, she just doesn't have anything there, at least not in this episode. This entire series was devised after Howard Ashman had passed away, and Howard Ashman was one of the big driving forces behind the movie, and especially of Ariel's personality. I wonder how much this series made him turn in his grave.
A certain percentage of the velocity of the Earth's rotation during this time was just Howard Ashman doing cartwheels in his coffin.
I just watched Howard on Disney+, so I've got him on the brain.
I'm grateful that Howard was released so The Road Trip won't be the first movie on Disney+ with a John Waters movie reference.
God.
Also, can I just say that if Triton has all those fucking powers, why couldn't he have just cleaned it all himself to begin with?
Yeah, at the end, he just goes to the surface and causes a rainstorm that I guess washes out the pollution.
Because that's how that works.
And then it cuts to the fucking epilogue where they set up a sequel that obviously never fucking happened.
I can't prove it, but I know that little crab is responsible.
I will have my revenge on that crab if it's the last thing I do. Fucking lightning crash. Then cut to the credits. Dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun. Just bright, sunny. It's okay, kids.
I was really hoping it was going to end with all the mutant crabs deciding, ooh, you're the food now.
Oh yeah, give it the hyenas with Scar ending. The sequel episode, if they'd gotten a 4th season and done one, should have been Dr. Vile's crazy sister!
Dr. Vile's crazy sister helps him achieve his dream of being part crab.
It's basically a prototype to Avatar.
Oh, I would so love to see Dr. Vile doing a parody of Part of Your World about how much he wants to be part crab. I want to be where crustaceans are. I want some pincers and an exoskeleton.
My favorite crab experiment in a television show was in an episode of Kamen Rider Super 1, in which they got a whole mess of crabs and kind of just like put them all in the shape of a monster and then did the Frankenstein thing. So they basically just mushed a whole bunch of crabs into a crab monster. So that's why I'm disappointed by this episode.
So it's like where the rubies in Steven Universe all form a giant ruby.
It's a crab made of crabs, also called crab dip.
All I wanna be is a giant crab experiment.
What do you do when you need something that looks like a horse? Usually we just glue a bunch of crabs together.
I know it wasn't like explicitly an environmental episode, but this was kind of the problem with like environmental plots in the 90s. They were so on the nose a lot of the time. Also at the same time kind of pussyfooted out of it.
They simultaneously bash you over the head with it and completely let you off the hook.
This is like the Captain Planetization of environmental messages, where the reason why they're polluting is because they're evil.
Right.
They're legitimately, maliciously attacking the planet. Whereas in the real world, it's just as simple as, well, this makes our profit margin go up a little bit, so we're gonna do it.
Yeah, it's easier, which leads people at home watching it to think, well, I'm not evil, so I'm fine. I don't have malicious intent, so everything's okay.
I guess it's better than Circle of Life and Environmental Fable, because at the least it's not saying, oh, your mere existence is what's causing the planet to die.
But environmentalists are taking care of it, so don't worry.
Timon and Pumbaa are eco-fascists.
I think we can all agree that what Captain Planet needed was more crab experiments.
Yes, I absolutely agree.
They had an episode about one STD, AIDS, so why not one about crabs?
We all remember DARE, Just Say No to Drugs, in the schools, but there was also one that was about
Just say no to mad science, kids.
Just say no to mad science. Just say no to crab experiments.
Crab
Not even once. This is your brain on crab experiments.
Just the more I think about it, the more it's making me laugh.
If someone offers you a giant crab, you say no way.
I'm not a crab, you're a lobster.
God, I just want a Cartoon All-Stars version of this episode.
More Howard Ashman.
Oh, yeah.
There's a million, billion wonderful ways to say crab experiment.
Crab experiments.
I think it is time to ask the question that I'm sure has been burning on all our brains this whole time. What's the attraction? So obviously the Disney parks have a bunch of Little Mermaid attractions. There's a Little Mermaid ride at DCA and at the Magic Kingdom in Florida. They still have Voyage of the Little Mermaid at Disney MGM Studio, or Disney Hollywood Studios. It'll always be Disney MGM to me. Who cares? How are they going to specifically work Island of Fear into either its own attraction or into those Little Mermaid attractions? Morgan!
Crab experiments. The new sampler platter at the Lamplight Lounge.
Kyle!
It probably should be a crab experiment, but like you get to see what your crab sona is at the end.
Kitty!
Star Tours The Adventures Continue, that new Rise of Skywalker film on Exeter, but now that giant octopus is placed with the crab experiments, and C-3PO is like, oh no, it's their crab experiments.
Crab experiments.
Well, that's what Admiral Akbar was. He was just one of Dr. Vile's crab experiments.
It's a crab!
Well, unfortunately, you're all wrong.
Oh, gosh darn it.
They're going to build their own massive e-ticket based on Universal's long gestating, long stuck in development hell plans for a Castle Dracula attraction. But since Disney doesn't have the rights to Dracula, they're just going to base it on Dr. Vile. And it's actually going to be an adjunct to the Little Mermaid ride, where half the people who ride Little Mermaid will suddenly find themselves going down an alternate route into Dr. Vile's laboratory, where he turns them into crab experiments.
Crab experiments.
Am I wrong for thinking that they should actually do this at Halloween?
Definitely. Yeah, that's going to be the Halloween overlay.
They put all the cast members at the Little Mermaid ride into these crab suits.
You know what? This podcast is now called Crab Experiments.
Yay!
I love it.
So, final verdict, folks. Is The Little Mermaid series, Season 3, Episode 3, Island of Fear, a Disney Plus or a Disney minus? Kitty?
I feel like most of the series might be a minus, but this episode is honestly a huge plus just because it's beautifully fucking dumb. And it's even a decent horror episode, so you know what? It's not nearly as dumb as Mafia Sharks.
Kyle?
I could have been watching Batman, Disney minus.
Morgan?
This one is tough. I'm not sorry I saw it. It's the sort of thing you kind of have to see for yourself to really understand what makes it so magical. I say if you're into ironic watches, like if you want to just watch something that makes you go, what the hell? This is a thumbs up. This is gonna put some jaws on the floor if you're having like a bad movie night with your friends.
I gotta side with Morgan and Kitty here. This is a Disney Plus for me. And I listed the other episode I covered for the live tweets as a Disney minus, but this is a Disney Plus because it's just so gloriously stupid. It has enriched my life. 'Twas blind, but now I see. I'm so glad this was the episode we brought back the podcast with. Thank you so much, Rob Bergman, for your request. This was amazing.
Thank you, Rob.
Rob Bergman, I bet you knew what sort of effect this was gonna have on us. You diabolical man. You did this on purpose.
I think Rob just is Dr. Vile. That's his...
Baby Tim Burton grew up and became Rob.
He's a mad scientist who inflicted this crazy brilliance upon us. I was grinning like a fucking loon throughout this whole thing. It is amazing.
I'm gonna start a crab experiment reanimate project.
Crab experiments.
Crab experiment.
Crab
experiments.
God bless this episode. God bless it.
So, who's got stuff to plug?
My Twitter is over at Mission Breakout, as I've stated. And also, within the next week or so, my friends Tyler and also our good friend Randy and I are going to be starting a podcast called Channel KRT, where we explore the best and worst of obscure TV and movies. So that should be fun.
Cool.
Very cool. Morgan, you got anything to plug?
Just my Twitter account. I'm at The Wire 2. Sometimes I make YouTube videos as well, but I don't have any current plans for any.
Kyle, got anything to plug?
Sure. TV's Kyle, TVSKYLE, just about everywhere, but especially Twitter. You can get my music at tvskyle.bandcamp.com, and please watch my show, Mighty Magiswords, on either Hulu or HBO Max, but probably HBO Max, because I think those are the ones they're actually counting.
Seriously, if you're listening to this podcast and you haven't seen Mighty Magiswords, what are you even doing with your life?
Thank you very much.
Yes, absolutely. Yee! Does any episode of Mighty Magiswords have any crab experiments?
Shoot, I mean, we do have lobster claw magiswords, but as we've covered earlier, lobsters aren't crabs.
No, don't count at all.
No.
Also, the goat episode is a masterpiece.
Oh, yes.
Thank you very much.
Come for the lobster claws, stay for the goat.
Honestly, there's just so much cool stuff in Mighty Magiswords that you very well might have done crab experiment episodes.
If we had had a season 3, episode 3, it probably would have involved crab experiments.
Gosh darn it.
Crab experiments.
And you can follow me on Twitter at Tony Goldmark. You can also follow this show on Twitter at EFVD Podcast. Once again, you can read all my coronavirus hiatus live tweets at tinyurl.com/EFVD live tweets 2020. I've also got a YouTube channel, youtube.com/Tony Goldmark, with a whole lot of videos archived, and later this week I will finally release the State of the Parks editorial video essay about the recently announced changes to Splash Mountain, and why I think they're a good thing, actually. I've also got 3 seasons of Some Jerk with a Camera, a whole bunch of One Movie Later vlogs from the past several years, and even a few scant episodes of this very podcast on my YouTube channel. You can find every episode of this very podcast from various online outlets, including pipedreampodcast.com, which is also the home to one of my favorite podcasts, The Weird Alphabet. We're also on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, all the usual places. If you like what you've been hearing and you want to help us out, please subscribe, leave a review, give us 5 stars. All that stuff helps us get discovered by the algorithm. And if you want to help the show even more, you can pledge to my Patreon, patreon.com/Tony Goldmark, where if you pledge any amount, even the bare minimum of $1 per month, you can hear new episodes of Escape from Walt Disney one day early on Tuesdays instead of Wednesdays. So Check all that stuff out. It's great to be back. And I am joined now by one of my very special guests on next week's episode, Emily Clark. How you doing, Emily?
I'm doing great, Tony. How are you?
I'm doing just splendidly, thank you. Would you like to read off which patron request the randomizer's choosing for us next week?
All right, here we go.
Okay, Smart House. Initiate random shuffle mode, please.
Initiating random shuffle mode.
Make a selection.
And the winner is...
Milo Murphy's Law, random episode 2016, requested by Alex the Azarath.
Milo Murphy's Law. All right.
I don't even know what this is.
Let's see how many episodes there are of it. 41 episodes. Okay, so Emily, now I need you to Google random number generator and plug in 1 through 41.
Okay, here we go. Generating 13.
13.
Lucky number 13.
Oh, that would be actually part 2 of a two-parter, so we'll just cover both parts.
Ah, yes.
Episodes 12 and 13 of Milo Murphy's Law, Season 1, Missing Milo. All right, join us next week on Escape from Walt Disney when we will cover Milo Murphy's Law, Season 1, Episodes 12 and 13, Missing Milo, Parts 1 and 2.
Come on home where your video's playing. Good times are waiting, it's true. Come where your family is waiting for Walt Disney and you. Walt Disney and you. Walt Disney and you.
Crab experiments.